All right, how you guys doing? This is Mike McCormick with Advanced Criminology Services here in Owings Mills, Maryland. I'm back on today to update you guys from the last video. We've since gotten reported information from the Commissioner's Office regarding this case. This information was just given out November 25th, yesterday, regarding a timeline of events. And I will tell you, I have a million questions. And I'm sure you have a million questions because you guys have been responding pretty good to me on the comments section. And if you notice, very few channels, if you send for a comment, very few channels will respond back. I, in turn, will try to answer just about everybody's comments that comment me, just out of your interest and respect. So, and if I don't get to you, it's just because, you know, we're pretty busy and stuff. But I'll try to get back to you guys, if not the same day, same time, within a couple of days. But I won't even take that long. I'll just try to get back to you because this particular case is kind of moving in terms of some of the information that we're getting finally from the Commissioner's Office. But I don't like what I'm seeing because it just doesn't, some of it just doesn't make sense. And I'm sure you will agree after you hear some of the things I have to say. But first I want to take a moment to thank my listeners and my viewers. I actually have viewers all over the world on this channel, from Jamaica, United Kingdom, Canada, Laos, and of course the U.S. So I want to thank you guys for staying up on all criminal justice issues, because criminal justice is an issue. So let's start off with what was reported from the Police Commissioner's Office here in Baltimore City. The first thing the Commissioner, and this you understand, all this information that we're getting is going to be coming from the discussions and interviews from the Homicide Division and from Internal Affairs. Now, before I get into this timeline, let me explain to you what's going on. There are two investigations that are going on parallel with each other. The first is a homicide investigation. That is to determine the events that led up to the officer's death and subsequent issues that deal with locating a suspect. So that's the homicide investigation. Then there's the Internal Affairs investigation. Okay, and that's to determine whether or not departmental policy was violated, either from his partner or, unfortunately, Detective Suter. So those things are done to basically, you have to keep the employees accountable for their actions in the field, actions or inactions in the field. And so this is why you have departmental policies that they're supposed to follow when taking action, when dealing with citizens in the street. So here we go. The Commissioner's Office indicates, and this is point number one, that Suter and another homicide detective were in the 900 block of Bennett Place to investigate a triple homicide that happened there last year, last December to be exact. And and point two was that the Commissioner indicates detectives were wearing suits and badges and canvassing for information. It means they were knocking on doors, talking to some people in reference to this case from last December. Now, the Commissioner's Office indicates that detectives don't wear body cameras. Well, that might be something they might, want to reconsider, soon. He also indicates that the officers had no specific plan to meet with anybody in that area that was related to the homicide that happened last year. Now, listen to this. This is very important. This is point 3. 20 minutes before the shooting, Suter and his partner observed someone engaged in suspicious activity who police believe is the shooter. Someone who was engaged in suspicious activity 20 minutes prior to the shooting. I'll let that marinate for a while on your mind. Point 4. There were 2 observations of this individual. One occurred 20 minutes prior, and one occurred just moments before the incident. The first time the suspicious person was observed, according to the partner, both Detective Suter and his partner saw the person behaving suspiciously. So in those 2 points, we have twice that this individual was observed by Suter and his partner. And yet, all we get is a jacket and a stripe. Unbelievable. You couldn't make this up. This is purely unbelievable. How you can see a suspect 20 minutes earlier, observe behavior then, see the same person 20 minutes later. I don't get it. It don't make sense. So I'm moving on. Now, the story goes from the partner that the officers left the area after the first observation without engaging the person. Okay? Now, if the person, okay, let me go back just a few here. 20 minutes and occurred just 20 minutes, and that the first time that the suspicious person was observed according to. Okay, they say the first time that they saw him, 20 minutes earlier, he was acting suspicious. Okay, now, there is a general order and policy in Baltimore City under policy number 701 that deals with investigative stops. If you felt that this person was suspicious then, why didn't you conduct an investigative stop then? This way, you could have certainly gotten the pertinent information under that policy that you're supposed to get during investigative stops. Is you're asking the person what they're doing in the area, why they're acting the way they're acting, get their name, rank, and serial number. Pretty much is what you're supposed to do. So that can be on file. Okay, but none of that was done. Okay, now, the shooting occurred on the vacant lot next to 959 Bennett Place on the west end of the block. Well, we already know that. We've already posted video to that. That's something the commissioner tried to hold back on, but we kind of figured that one out. That was going to be, wasn't easy, but I'm just saying that it just didn't jive when we first heard it. So the police also say that in a brief transmission, because now we're talking about the engagement on the second observation of the suspect, where Officer Suter now approached the person to ask this person for information or whatever the case may have been. It would have been more than a field interview. In a field interview, under the Baltimore City Police Department's rules and regulations, under field interviews, you do not, a suspect or a person, let's say not a suspect, but a person, does not have to cooperate with the police officer in terms of giving you your name and anything like that. That's a field interview requirement. But when it becomes an investigative stop, which this was, then that person is to be detained and asked a couple of questions as to why their behavior is such. Okay. They also go into, because I'm still there dealing with the officer in the contact of this suspect. The police commissioner officers report that was a brief transmission from Suter's radio, and apparent sound of gunfire can be heard. There was about 2 to 3 seconds of intelligible noise or conversations, but it was determined that the officer was in clear distress. The police report after the crime lab got there that they also saw signs of a violent struggle, and they say the signs of physical struggle on Detective Suter's clothing are evident to us. Now, I just want to go back real quick. In most homicides where the person has expired on site, generally speaking, you have the body there, photos are taken, and the crime lab is able to come out and make a determination in terms of a forensic determination about in what way the person might have been killed, which direction of travel as far as the rounds went, why a person ended up falling the way that they did, why a gun is in the position it's in, why the radio was in the position it was in. Well, unfortunately, in this case, we don't have that, because as soon as he was shot and the partner ran to his aid, they immediately put him in the car and drove off towards the hospital. Now, so it was also reported that they were involved in a car accident on the way to the hospital. Let me check this to make sure, because I'm almost sure that's what it says here. Let me see. Okay, it says here, Suter was transported to the hospital in a patrol vehicle which got into an accident while en route. Then the officer had to be taken out of that car, and they were met there with a ambulance to shock trauma. I will tell you folks, if you're certainly those folks from around the world, folks from not from this area of the United States, I will tell you that the distance from where the officer was murdered to shock trauma is driving distance in terms of minutes, about 3. From that location, 3 minutes. Not a 5-minute ride at all, trust me. From there, they drive across the bridge on Schroeder Street, make a left turn on Mulberry Street, drive down to Green Street, make another right, head on down Green Street south till they get to Lombard Street, and then make a right. Boom, they're right there. So that's a 3-minute ride, and I'm talking about not even driving too fast. So to get into an accident, knowing you need to help your partner, whoever was driving the vehicle, was not. I'm not sure, because they said patrol car, so that might have been in the marked unit, not their unmarked unit. Again, it's a calamity as far as I'm concerned, right then and there. So let me back it up, because I have these notes on another screen that I'm reading to you guys. So let me back it up. Okay. Where I said that the commissioner's office reported that there was a sign of physical struggle on his clothing, which means that it was a dirt area. You know, we've been out there. I've been out there, and so I know the area very well in terms of where the struggle took place. And in fact, there would be dirt everywhere on that. If that officer was struggling, they were rolling around on the dirt or ground. I don't know. I can tell you that he had to have dirt from the top of his face all the way down to the bottom of his shoes, because the dirt was just apparent that's there. Also rocks. What I didn't talk about in one of my last videos where we did the whiteboard discussion was that in Area B, and if you go back and look at Area B was an area where it was on an incline. So once that officer entered into that area right there, he would have been on an incline, meaning walking up towards the individual, where the individual was looking down on the officer, which is not a good position to be in anyway if you're going to tussle and get into a fight with somebody. Just alone, the dynamics of someone actually being above you is kind of a plus in their department if it comes to a confrontation. Also, these officers wear regular shoes. They don't wear regular police shoes that you see most officers wear. So they're wearing their Oxfords, maybe, leather soles, that kind of thing. And you got rocks back there. So I can only imagine that he just could never, if he had to protect himself, he probably just could never get a decent grip with his feet, slipping and sliding all over the place, as opposed to someone who may have been in tennis shoes, boots, which would have been a better fit for someone in those conditions in that area right there. Okay, so they indicated that the struggle was brief. It was a matter of seconds, which I told you that. See, all this stuff is coming out after we told you. We've been on point this whole case since it happened in terms of pretty much how it happened, pretty much what was going on during the struggle. I told you that it took seconds. They're just coming out what it was a matter of seconds, okay? He was shot once in the head. We told you he was shot once in the head. We told you it was in 3 to 5 inches, which we don't know, but they say at close range, okay? Trust me, it's within 3 to 5 inches when they say close range. If not point blank, where the muzzle was on his brain when he pulled the trigger, suspect pulled the trigger. That's how close we're talking about. So survival in a case like that would probably be 99% not, simply because of the penetration and speed of the bullet in entering into the brain. They indicated it was a close gunshot wound. Right, 3 shots were fired. They maintained there was 3 shots were fired. However, we have heard from other people, other witnesses, that there were 4 shots. We'll stay with the 3, and we'll stay with the 3 because they only found 3 of those cartridges next to the detective's body. Okay. mind you, now there's no report that his partner ever fired his weapon as well. So let's keep that in mind too. That might become an issue later on. And so this is why, before I move forward, this is why the Internal Affairs Division gets involved real early in any type of violent struggle, any type of contact with a citizen, where an officer might be subject to an investigation through the use of deadly force, where an officer is a witness to something, because there are a lot of dynamics that can play out in this case here when it comes to what his partner did or did not do. So we'll move on. Let's see. Police have not indicated whether or not any DNA or fingerprints other than suitors were found on the weapon. So far we have no indication of whether or not trace evidence of suspect fingerprints or DNA has been found on Officer Suter's weapon. They also said, and this is interesting, you know, it's chilling when I tell you this, that Officer Suter was still holding his radio in his left hand. I indicated to you on one of my videos that he was a right-handed officer. Now, you're probably saying, well, Mike, how did you know he was a right-handed officer? Well, there's a video tape of this officer that local news media was showing here of him working on a couple cases. And at that time, I made an observation of him holding an umbrella. Now, you might say, well, how is that significant? How can you tell that, you know, that's what, you know, he's a left-handed, right-handed person? Well, I will tell you, most people, particularly police officers who are used to carrying a weapon and if they are right-handed or left-handed, they will always put an item that's not going to interfere with them grabbing their weapon if they need to grab their weapon. So when I looked at the news report and I saw him holding the umbrella, he was holding the umbrella in his left hand. So we reported that he had the radio in his left hand and he was a right-handed officer. Again, we reported this 2 or 3 days ago. I reported this a week ago. So we're trying to stay ahead of the game here. All right. So although it's chilling, we kind of know that just from what they reported, that he was still holding his radio in his left hand after the shooting, despite the struggle for his gun. And I think I guess he, you know, because he panicked. Let's face it, most of us, if we were confronted with the same situation, probably would have panicked as well. And he had that radio in his hand, hoping that he could get some communications and hoping that he would get help. But you know, the incident happened too fast for any help to come to his aid. Let's just say this much: any help other than his partner, and I'll leave it at that. They indicate that they have body-worn camera footage from responding officers, and it says here that Detective Suter's radio never left his left hand. Okay, so that's where that comes from. Other officers who responded to the scene saw him that he had his radio in his left hand. The commission also said that his partner, and they keep saying this, and I'm getting sick of hearing this crap, that his partner was in the immediate vicinity of the shooting. He said the partner is seen now, which we didn't know, that now you guys will know, that his partner is seen on a private surveillance tape taking cover across the street when the gunfire rang out, meaning that either he was on that side of the street already, maybe talking to some people, canvassing the area still. I don't know, I'm just guessing. And when the shots rang out, he jumped behind his vehicle. Now, I've learned since then, because there was some other reporting on this, that once the shooting was over with, now this comes from a witness who lived right next to the actual incident. This older black gentleman came and he was interviewed not only by Homicide, but he was interviewed by the Channel 45 WBFF, who interviewed me. And for all of you who didn't see that interview is on the 23rd, Thanksgiving Day, WBFF. So if you want to see that interview with myself and the reporter that day, just go to WBFF and bring that up interview. So that in and of itself is interesting, that they found the gentleman, and the gentleman indicated, and this is what he said out of his mouth. He said that he heard 4 shots. He still maintains that he heard 4 shots, and that the second officer went for cover, and then the second officer came from behind his vehicle and was hunched down in a manner like this. I'm going to show you exactly what he said. He said it was in a manner like this, where the officer was moving forward to where the area where the shots went out, and at the same time the officer is yelling, "Sean, Sean," like that. That's what the second individual, that's what the witness, who lives right next door to the whole incident, heard. So I'm just giving you that. That's not in the report here. That was something that we later found on the news reports. Okay, so moving on. Now, the police have declined to describe the partner's observations and have not identified him, saying he is a witness to a murder. Witness is a term that police says. Witness is a term used for anyone with information about a case. Okay, well, it would be nice to know that if you saw a suspect 20 minutes earlier, and he was acting suspicious then, it would be nice to know certainly if you could have certainly gotten more of a clothing description of this particular suspect, because in my mind, you being a witness is no better than the average person on the street, and unfortunately, we require more of our police officers, because that's why citizens want to be protected, and we require more of our police officers to be trained professionals and observe. That's what you're there for. You're an observer. If anything, a police officer is you observe. That's what you do. When I was working undercover narcotics, we would sit and sit and sit on surveillance all day long, doing nothing but observation and taking notes. Observation and taking notes. And you can learn a lot from observation and taking notes. So I'm surprised that we just don't have as much detail that we should have in this particular case. And I'm moving on. Now, you'll love this one. The partner did not have his radio with him, and guess what he did? He called 911 from his cell phone. Really? 911 from your cell phone? Shots rang out, and you're calling 911 from your cell phone? Now, I'm sure you guys out there, and you have the same questions I have. That's why I put it on out here for you guys, because these are the questions that you're going to be asking when you start commenting back to me. So I'm just giving you the information that I certainly find unbelievable to try to respond and kind of figure out, how we can move this investigation along further than what it is. So when you have an individual who's your partner and you don't have a radio, what communications do you have in the event you two get split up, which happened in this particular case? What help can you be to me if I go around a corner, or if I step in somebody's house, or I walk into a store while you're about a radio car? What help can you be to me if you don't have a radio to hear me asking for help? And another thing you guys don't know out there, but I will tell you, that all specialized units work on a private channel called Citywide. They don't work off the district channel, meaning that we have 9 districts in Baltimore City, and so every district is dedicated a channel to work off of for conversations. That way, that's designed so that there's not a lot of crowded noise from different people talking on the radio. So you're able to isolate the different districts so they can handle calls for service in their areas, and then you're able to isolate the specialized units and the investigative units so they can work off of one channel. Now, it's not a bad thing, because if an officer gets in trouble in a citywide channel and he gives a location as where he is, that citywide channel is just going to send the signal out to that particular district. In this case here, the Western District, there's a signal 13 at the intersection of Schroeder Street and Bennett Place. And the officers, give me a second here. And the officers, and the officers will be there in a short period of time. So in this case here, the second officer would have never been able to call citywide, and they could have probably responded quicker. Not to say that calling 911 is not any quicker, but you know, like I know, you have a cell phone. It does take a few seconds for the cell phone to ring into 911, and you give your location. They'll have the officers' units respond under signal 13. So I just thought I'd bring that up. I can't believe that the police department is that strapped for money that you can't have two people with two separate radios. Unbelievable. So we're moving on. Now, when the partner called for help, okay, this partner called for help, 911, the dispatcher said he had no suspect description. The officers responding to the scene worried that the shots had come from a nearby building, and in the hours and days after the incident, police searched many nearby vacant buildings, and that's what we saw on national TV and local TV of all those units that came in from the counties and the city to start going in a lot of these houses, vacant houses that were in that area. Okay, but it's interesting to note out of everything I just said that the dispatcher, they're professionals, they're 911 women. The first thing they're going to ask, give us a description. This officer couldn't even give a description. He had no suspect description. So just think about the timing of everything now. He picks up the phone to call 911. He doesn't have a description. And meanwhile, he's trying to aid his partner. So at this point, there really is no description. Really is no description, because she just said he didn't even give her one when he called through 911. So even when the officers who were responding, because I'm sure once he said he had an officer down, she immediately notified all the units in that area to respond to that area under signal 13. And I'm sure the officers were wondering to themselves, and I'm sure if we could get transmission from some of those officers who respond to the scene, I'm sure they were asking, do we have a suspect? Do we have a suspect? Can somebody tell me the direction of travel? I guarantee you, if we go back and we listen to transmissions from KGA during that whole incident, particularly the first 5 minutes of responding by the officers from not only that district, there were officers on the signal 13, you got officers coming from Central District, Southwest District, Southern District, and they're also coming from Western District itself. I can trust me, when an officer needs distress signals coming out, you're going to have tons of police rolling in that area. They're all asking, okay, let's wait for a description. Let's wait for a description. I think I told you my story some years ago when I was in the police department, that I didn't respond that fast to a call for a robbery, because I was waiting and anticipating a description, and it didn't take long, and that's why that case was solved. Because from the time that I got above that area, maybe 4 blocks away from the initial robbery, the suspects were just passing my vehicle, and I had the description already. That's why it's important, one of the first thing you do, and it's also a general order, by the way, policy, that you give a description out, and clothing, as well as the color of the individual, height, weight if you can, you know, and the clothing is so important. It's just so important. So I'll leave that alone. I'm just hyped up about that because it just doesn't make sense. So we move on. When he called the dispatcher, he said that his partner got shot. Again, there was no description. The dispatcher said, no description. Okay. And I find it funny that when you responded, see, you don't know when the phone call was made. Was it made while you were by the car, taking cover, or were you calling 911 in, or after shooting stopped, you ran to where your partner was and you called 911 then? Right? And at that point, it wouldn't have made too much sense to call 911, because you could have took the radio from Officer Suter's hand and did the same damn thing. I don't understand it. Okay, so here we go. On the night of the shooting, there was the night of the shooting. This means this is some time now, because they've been down that area probably some time now. You basically have over 150 officers in this area on the night of the shooting with a vague possible description of a suspect as an African-American male wearing a black jacket with a white stripe. And Commissioner Davis said that that description came from the partner. How in the world, in Jesus' name, you can be somewhere for 20 minutes earlier, see a suspect, and all you can say is he had a black jacket with a stripe on? Unbelievable. I'm going to keep it moving. Suda was transported to the hospital in a patrol vehicle, which got into an accident. I discussed that earlier because I found that and gave that to you. Okay. Now, basically, they indicate here that Detective Suda died from a fatal brain injury, gunshot, and he was pretty much dead on his way there because they immediately put him on life support when he got there. The police said that the shooter might have been wounded. However, the evidence, and we've reported this, suggests the suspect may have been wounded. They searched the emergency rooms, doctor's offices, negative results. Again, the officer was pronounced dead. An autopsy was not performed until 4 days later because the officer was an organ donor. So that's when the actual autopsy was performed, is after the organs were harvested, they went ahead and did that. We now know that, of course, the reports were that the whole area was locked down for about almost 5-6 days. They found a bullet fragment they believe killed Suda, which means that that bullet penetrated his head, and it had his DNA on it. Let's move on here. Give me a sec. All right. Now they get into the situation where he was supposed to be scheduled to testify before the federal grand jury and the gun task force. Commissioner Davis says he learned of the testimony Tuesday night on November 21st in a meeting with the acting U.S. Attorney and Special Agent in charge of the FBI. I think maybe they might consider in the future that when you decide to that the commissioner's office, although the commissioner is a very busy person, he has a lot of acting commissioners and deputy commissioners under his command, that you would think that these folks should have all that information regarding officers' testimony in a grand jury proceeding in reference to a high-profile case like that gun squad is. That's a high-profile case. A case like that hasn't happened in many, many years. Trust me. We publish the stats all the time, and I can tell you on one of my videos I read out at least 30 or 40 instances from 1999. Okay, and so they've never had an incident involving these many officers in this particular situation charged with RICO. Okay, that's a racketeering charge that the feds give you. And generally, when you're wrapped up and caught up in a racketeering charge, that's pretty much plea bargain. Very, very. I will tell you, probably 99% of people plea bargain under a RICO statute. Generally speaking, it's because they've been investigating you for 2 or 3 years before they even bring the indictment, which means they've got you head up, dead up, and whatever way up that you're facing these charges. And basically, at the end of the day, it's time for you to plead and get the lessest sentence possible if that's available for you, if that's on the table. So that being a serious case, that I would believe that somebody should have known in the deputy commissioner's office at least that Officer Suda was in fact a person scheduled to testify. Okay, I will tell you this, just so we can kind of clear up the air a little bit. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You guys know that. I told you that before. There are 2 different investigations. One that involved Officer Suda and an individual who used to be his partner several years ago in the Western District. Then there's the gun squad investigation, 2 separate investigations. That's dealing with the 8 officers who were charged under the RICO statute. Officer Suda was never a witness for those 8 officers. That particular investigation involved other officers in that unit who were telling on each other, and you had one officer in that unit wearing a wire. So let's separate the 2 investigations, because I think what's been going on, and it'd have been nice if the police commissioner would have come out and said that. So I'm going to tell you it firsthand, if you didn't hear or don't know it, that there are 2 separate investigations. You had the 8 officers, the gun squad, and then what happened is because Officer Suter was a partner with one of those particular guys who were charged in the racketeering, one of the 8 officers, okay? He was his partner 7 years ago. What happened? There was a suspect that they arrested. The suspect claims that the second officer, who was also one of the 8 officers, planted drugs on him. Okay? Now, how did that information come about? What happened is that that individual was sitting in prison all these years, 7 years, and when he heard that that particular officer was one of the officers involved in the gun squad RICO case, he wrote the state's attorney's office. Okay? That's what happened. Wrote the federal prosecutor's office and say, hey, look, that guy was a person who I saw plant drugs. Okay? That guy. Now, he's already charged. He's already going to jail on the new RICO charges, period. He ain't coming home no time soon, nor the rest of them. So what happened was that once Officer Suter was called in for basically they called him in and say, look, you were partners with this guy, weren't you? Yeah. Well, did you see him plan anything, or did you not see anything, didn't plan anything? I would tend to believe that Officer Suter probably really didn't see anything, because I'm gonna tell you, you got some sneaky guys out here working in uniform and working plain clothes that you might be a good guy, but they got you teamed up with an idiot. And you might not see some of the crap that he does, you know. Or if I'm standing outside of a vehicle, or I'm talking to a witness outside the vehicle, and you searching the vehicle, and all of a sudden you put something in it, I would have never known that. I would have never known that. I thought you found something, and I would say, okay, good job, man. And I would tell the guy, and the next thing you know, this guy who's in jail is saying, man, that ain't my stuff. It never was. That officer put that stuff in there. This is how Officer Suter's name comes up in the whole case, man. This is how it happened. If anybody tell you different, they will be lying. I've got the proof. So I'm going to leave it at that and move on. Now, it says here that Officer Suter was going testimony about an incident that occurred several years ago that included officers that are now federally indicted. 2 separate issues, okay? Now, let me tell you one thing. I put this out there, and I'm putting it out there again. The officers that were charged in the federal racketeering, okay, all 8 of them, they probably did about 10 different, broke about 10 different laws, federal laws and state laws, while wearing a police officer's badge. And the things that they did were so stupid, and I think I've said this before in a video, that collectively, if all 8 of them sat down and they had the answers to the SAT tests, they would have failed. That's how stupid they were, and that's why they got caught. Tell you the other thing. If you didn't know how it works in federal holding facilities while you're waiting to go to trial, and anyone that can tell you who's ever sat in a federal prison, number one, phones are monitored 24/7, which means that any communications you have with the outside world are monitored and tracked. So if you mention anything about a hit, a murder, or whatever, those trigger a voice-controlled machine that picks up that conversation. Now, writing, mail, all mail going out of federal facility is open, read in some cases. Mail coming in is always open and read in most cases, in fact, in all cases. Okay? Visits are closely monitored in a federal institution. Now, what the conspiracy theorist people want to have you to believe, that these 8 knuckleheads who got caught were able to spin this particular conspiracy deal and hire somebody to happen to be up on Bennett Place at a particular time who didn't bring a gun. I don't know hitmen that don't bring a gun to a crime, but this particular individual didn't bring a gun to a crime. And for this murder to take place of Officer Suter would mean that this individual would have had to won that battle, fighting, struggling with Officer Suter, to get his gun from him to take his life. If you believe that, I got some stuff to sell you in whatever country that there is. I'll sell you real estate for whatever price. And if you go for it, I'm going to get your money. But I had to bring that up because that's how crazy it is. And you'll see, and you guys will comment on this later on as time goes on this investigation, that I knew what I was talking about. So let's move on. This is pretty much it. Indicate the suitor did work. This is the last part. The suitor did work with a couple of officers indicted in that particular case. And that's not uncommon. When you work in specialized units, you will work with people. Now, working with people does not necessarily mean that you rode in a car with them. That doesn't mean that. That means that they might have been in the squad with you, or they might have been attached to your unit for a couple of raids or something like that. That's what that means. We're not talking about it every single day seeing people. In some cases, you don't. So I wanted to bring that up. And so I'm going to entitle, I'm titling this particular video, Timeline Issues with Partner in Sean Suiter's Murder. And we'll leave it at that. And we've got coming up this week, we're going to do some things out at the site. Maybe we might be able to talk to some people who might want to talk to us and tell us some things. I don't know. But feel free to give me your comments as well. You know, I want your comments. What your thoughts are on this case, because I know you guys got a million thoughts out there, because I see the comments when you tell me. But also subscribe. That's just another click. Just hit the red button and subscribe as well. My name is Mike. I'm with Advanced Criminology Services in Owings Mills, and I'll see you next time I post.